It's Thursday, June the 5th, 2025. You are listening to an episode of Wes and Shelly Share, which I have no idea what episode it is because we don't have connectivity where we are. But I can say this, I think this is the most gorgeous picnic spot. I mean, it's certainly one of the most gorgeous. It's probably the most gorgeous picnic spot we've ever had, and it's the prettiest place we've ever made a podcast. So, Shelly, paint the scene for us, please.
Well, one thing you need to know is we have picnicked and camped in a lot of beautiful places. So it's hard to say this is the most beautiful, but it certainly ranks up there. So we are at a campground in Cherokee, North Carolina. It's called Mile High Campground, and it truly is. Well, Wes could give you the specific. Oh, okay, a little over a mile high. And so it's a primitive campground, meaning it doesn't have electricity, but it does have running water that you can get. And then it does have hot showers, which is incredible. I wouldn't say it's very bougie, but it is certainly nice to be able to take a hot shower every day. We are at a campsite that nobody is camping in that has this beautiful view. We decided to not do tents this time, but to do one of their little camping cabins. And it just so happens the camping cabin doesn't have the best view. So we hiked down to one of the empty campgrounds a little farther down, tent sites. But I'm sitting on a picnic table. We're having a picnic, and I'm looking out over the Blue Ridge Mountains, and it is spectacular. We're looking out into the Smokies, and so the Smokies get their name because they do. They look very smoky, so it's not a clear view, but you have these layers of mountains and layers of different shades of blue. So the green around it kind of frames from the trees, and then you look out, and I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers?
7 or 8.
That I can see. This is all Cherokee property, tribal lands, Cherokee private. And then we're looking out into the Smokies, which it's a national park, the Smoky National Park. So it kind of is adjacent to that. Absolutely beautiful. And that's where we're having our picnic today. So do you want to tell them a little about what we did yesterday?
Yeah, so actually, there's some clouds. It rained a little bit last night after we got back from an amazing theatrical experience. I think it's going to rain again here today.
Come on, Moose.
The dogs are off. The dogs are off their leash because no one is around us at all, and so we can do that. But Moose likes to graze on the grass, so we have to watch him. And hopefully, we won't get rained on and have to do the rest of this inside our little cabin. But I thought it would be good to talk a little bit about what we experienced yesterday and some of the thoughts going through our head, because there's a lot to process from this historical pageant, which is a lot like Texas. Maybe Shelley can tell a little bit about her experiences seeing Texas. And was that in Canyon? Or where would they do? Palo Duro Canyon. But this was called Unto These Hills. And anyway, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about healing and personal healing from trauma. And then we are going to tell a little bit about the books we're reading, because we're both into some books that we're really enjoying a lot. And we can share them and talk a little bit about them. So last night, we went to a theatrical performance that is in its 75th year. Let me drop this number on you. The Cherokee people have been in these mountains and hills for around 13,000 years. 13,000 years. And this particular theatrical performance, which tells the story of their people, part of the story, is celebrating their 75th anniversary. And this was an open-air theater. And gosh, there weren't just, I don't know if it was a 10th full. It was a huge theater. I don't know how many it would seat in all, but it started at 8 o'clock, and there was a little band that sang some songs beforehand. But it reminded both of us a little bit of Texas. So you want to tell a little bit about Texas and sort of, I don't know, how that kind of relates?
We have a car passing by, so Wes is going to hold on to the dogs. So I grew up in Lubbock, Texas, where we learned kind of our Texas state history when I was in fourth grade. And we learned about the Comanche Indians, and we learned about Colonel Mackenzie. In fact, I went to Mackenzie Junior High, learned about the Spanish explorers, Coronado and De Soto. And so that was a part of our history. Well, in Texas history, we learned about Colonel Mackenzie, who was in the cavalry, and the Comanche Indians, which I would say that the Panhandle and Peladura Canyon was all where their lands. And so there was a story where Colonel Mackenzie, towards the Indian of the uprisings, where Oklahoma Indian Territory had opened up and our government was moving all of the Native Americans into that Indian Territory around Oklahoma. The Comanche Indians, they were Plains Indians, so they traveled around. Horses were very important. But Paladura Canyon was deep, and that's where a water source was that had water running through it. And so that's one of the springs along the Ogallala Aquifer, which is a water source deep underground. So I'm sure there were springs all over the area, but it was a constant water source. So therefore, it was habitable to the natives who made that home. Anyway, there's a story along the Indian Removal Act, and I don't know the years on that, but where Colonel Mackenzie, for those natives that did not want to move onto the reservations, where many of them and their horses were forced over the canyon walls. Anyway, genocide, basically. Yes. Yeah, and so they just massacred all of their horses and their food source, and anyway, it basically forced them. Now, again, this is from my memory, so I don't know the exact facts of that, but we did learn about that. So anyway, there was a story, and there's also a big ranching history involved in Texas history, and so that was also a big part of ours. So there was Paladura Canyon, which is absolutely beautiful. It's a small Grand Canyon. It really is spectacular. If you're ever in Canyon, Texas, definitely worth going to visit there. But they had a big amphitheater and a play that would tell the history of the area. So started with the Native Americans, went into the cattle ranching, and then later into the farmers, I suppose, and all of that. So anyway, a lot of memories about going and seeing that several times throughout my childhood growing up. And it was really extremely well done, but a great way that I was exposed to our history of the area. So anyway.
And you loved ranching history. Like you had Mrs. Flint. I think you've talked about Mrs. Flint in fourth grade. Your mother loved teaching, all of that. But of course, one of the things that's very important to realize is that the history we study in school and the history that's in the textbook is not the complete history. And, the folks who, win wars and establish their form of society and culture, civilization, empire, are the ones who write those history books. And so this experience of seeing unto these hills, right? Mm-hmm. Was really, I would call it hard history that many of us have not learned about. Shelly and I moved to Oklahoma from Lubbock, Texas in 2006. And I did not know there were 35 federally recognized tribes within the boundaries of Oklahoma, but there are even more tribes than that living in Oklahoma and then, within the United States, within North America. Let's talk about our impressions of last night. It's so interesting to me to discern the different key elements and parts of their history as a people, which they are sharing with us. And I got a sense that, there's a line between entertaining what is largely a white audience. I mean, there was one African American member of the cast. I think there were 77 folks involved, mostly young people. And I forget what the statistic I read. A significant number of them are members of the Cherokee tribe. Someone had told us, in fact, it's the man who built this campsite, that they are about 20,000 strong. And they said 17,000 when they were talking about the removal during the Trail of Cheers, during the presidency of Andrew Jackson. But overall, I felt that they did an excellent job portraying different elements. And I had heard a little bit about Sequoia. I know Sequoia was the one who created the alphabet for Cherokee. I had an opportunity to do quite a bit of professional development through a grant in eastern Oklahoma at a community called Marietta School that's in Stillwell, which was one of the ending points of the Trail of Tears. And I learned at that time that there had been this eastern band of Cherokee who did not come with the others on the Trail of Tears. They hid in the hills. And then eventually, because there was a descendant who was, I think, a descendant of both maybe a Cherokee mother and a racialized white father, was able to lease land, to purchase land. And so anyway, today, the eastern band of the Cherokee have, I think he said, over 10,000 acres. And we're looking right now, we're on their ancestral lands and their current property, current land, and we're looking out onto it. And so I felt like there are chapters of history, like the uprising of Tecumseh and the way in which Tecumseh tried to unify different northeastern tribes against the United States, the Shawnee. Were the Iroquois in there? I mean, there's so much that you hear a little bit about in school, but they did a really good job dramatizing it. But it also struck me how I'm sure it's challenging for them trying to walk this line between wanting to have a program that is, quote, entertaining and enjoyable, but at the same time, it's teaching lessons and it's teaching really hard history. And so overall, I think it's an outstanding program. It's so important that we try and intersect with history in meaningful ways and learn from history. I had read or heard some time back that, sometimes people wonder, well, what does it look like to survive genocide? And, the native peoples, as they would say more in Canada, the First Nations, are continuing survivors through resilience of genocidal colonial dynamics that have displaced many of them from their homes, led to the deaths of millions. Moose, don't eat that. And so anyway, there's a lot to process though from that. So what were your overall impressions, Shelly? What did you enjoy about the program? What stood out for you experiencing this for the first time? Because I'm going to predict we're going to come back and see this again sometime, probably with our family.
I think what I really enjoyed was the cast, and you could tell, and I think many of them have done this before, but it's a great way for them to expose their young people not only to their history, but to expose it to teaching others. I liked how they kept reiterating peaceful. They were a peaceful people, and they wanted their families to live in peace, and they wanted to live in peace with their neighbors. And so that. And again, because there were people of all ages in the presentation, is another way that they're forming their cultural norms and their identities around peaceful nature. I wouldn't have called it a very polished, but it was a passionate. They were very passionate about the story that they were telling. And I think they did. It made me want to be more curious about the facts. And I think that's a sign of a good program or a good presentation or a good show, is to ignite curiosity and want to know more of what the facts were. And this is what I've learned. So now what can I do with that? And so I think Wes and I have become very curious about this history, and we're looking forward to learning more about this history, especially from the perspective of their people and their beliefs. And anyway, so and it was a beautiful backdrop. It was in a kind of a little canyon area, and the music and the birds and the just everything, the environment. I'm a big atmosphere person, and so it just had a wonderful environment and atmosphere that was very authentic to the story that they were telling.
We did not visit the Cherokee Village and Museum. We visited the Visitor Center. And actually, a couple of folks, and maybe more than a couple, a group of people from the Cherokee tribe have set off on bicycles to retrace one of the paths of the Trail of Tears. And when we were in Oklahoma, again, working with teachers at Marietta School in Stillwell, I think maybe Shelly and I had been there originally first, but we were working primarily with pre-K and kindergarten teachers. We were able to go in Tahlequah to a Cherokee museum, and they had recreated a traditional village. And a really wild thing that happened, I'm almost constantly documenting things with pictures and video, and I shot photos and a video of one of the museum employees, staff, who was dressed as a traditional Cherokee brave and was explaining and showing different aspects of their, society, their cultures, their traditions, their ways. I was contacted years later via Flickr, which is the website where I share pictures, by his wife, because he had been actually killed in a car accident a year or two after I had videoed that. And those were the only videos of their father talking and sharing like that his children had. Anyway, it was just wild. And I think it's really interesting where we have, some intersections. We've kind of by choice done the reverse of the Trail of Tears. We came from Oklahoma 3 years ago here to North Carolina. We had the opportunity. We are in many ways very privileged in this society and culture. And we were able to come here as teachers. And, there's just so much we don't know. And it's so important, I think, to learn history in direct ways, not just in abstract ways. And so anyway, overall, it was great. I would encourage people to go see this and to learn. I think that, learn about the history wherever you are, because place-based history, place-based education. Where is the invisible history in your community, in your state, in the region where you find yourself, and then traveling to another place and seeking to understand that history and those people. I think it can really be important and valuable, and there can be unexpected connections that happen as a result of it. And I know just being in this space, literally on the top of these mountains, again, we heard the first night we got here, and I don't remember his name. He was the man who, maybe in 2018, something like 20 years, they built this campsite. He built all these campsites, but they have a spring, and he found the spring, and he enlarged it. I think he had done a lot of work with plumbing and sewage systems, and so anyway, it's just, this is really a special place. The tent sites cost $35 a night. Again, it's called Mile High Campground. Not surprisingly, I learned about this through AI because I asked ChatGPT, hey, we want to go to the area around Cherokee, North Carolina, and find campsites that have beautiful views of the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Smoky Mountains. And sure enough, this is it. The cabin that we're in is an extra $10. And if you have more people, there's additional fees and stuff. But it is just spectacular. It's fantastic. And I would encourage people to check this out. I think we're going to definitely return to this area, to this campsite. And we certainly want to learn more about Cherokee history, but also just like the shared history that we have as humans, because that's one of the biggest lessons of this, right? We're all human beings, and there's this tendency we have had, and we still do, to other people, and we do have different tribes and different, cultural groups. But we are all human beings. And that was one of the biggest things that Andrew Jackson and all of those who, enforced and were in favor of the Indian Removal Acts that forced the Trail of Tears was this idea that the Cherokee neighbors were not full, citizens of the country, were not full human beings, to be accorded full rights. And that's a struggle that we still have today. And it's important for us to continue to grapple with that and learn about that.
Same here.
All right. At least we're staying. We're not leaving. Okay. You want to tell... this is like not a little lighter. Well, hey, let's go to halftime. Let's do that. And then we're going to come back and talk about... you don't want to talk about trauma and healing?
Okay.
Okay. We're going to talk about trauma and healing, and then we'll talk about the books that we're reading.
Hey there, North Carolina! Are you ready to experience a funnel cake revolution? It's time to meet Fryer's Funnel Cakes, where tradition meets taste and deliciousness is just a bite away.
Created by two passionate school teachers, Fryer's Funnel Cakes isn't just about satisfying your sweet tooth. It's a story of family, dedication, and a sprinkle of teachers' love in every bite.
Imagine a warm, golden funnel cake dusted with the perfect amount of powdered sugar. And wait for it, you get to drizzle as much or as little chocolate syrup as your heart desires.
Got an event? Want to bring some joy to your gathering? Fryer's Funnel Cakes is ready to hit the road and bring our sizzling sweet sensations to you.
Don't just take our word for it. Here's what one of our satisfied customers had to say.
Well, I thought I'd had a good funnel cake, but, when I had one of them Fryer's Funnel Cakes, it just set a new standard in taste and excellence. It's a game changer for sure.
So, what are you waiting for, Matthews? Head over to our Facebook page at facebook.com/Fryer's Funnel Cakes, and let's make your next event a deliciously memorable one.
Through line, I'm like...
All right, so there we are for halftime. Shelly's like, I'm not exactly sure about this. I shared a week ago Sunday a YouTube live that I have since made public, and then I also put it on YouTube, and I called it Healing and Starting Over. And wow, of anything that I have shared in 10 plus years, and maybe even more, this really struck some chords with multiple people. And some of the things that I was talking about, I had just come back from Colorado Springs, where I was with our daughter Rachel for a couple days. I drove 1,500 miles across the country and got to spend a little bit of time with my dad in Kansas, and then with Rachel. But I told a little bit of the story of how tough it's been to recover and heal. Yeah, don't throw that away. Let's save it. From leaving the Air Force, because I didn't get to have a full career in the Air Force. I went to the Air Force Academy and graduated in 4 years and went on to Mexico City on a scholarship, and then went into pilot training, which I completed about a quarter of, and then ended up, having a medical discharge. And if Rachel had not decided to go to the Air Force Academy and to, enter into this life and journey of being a cadet, and then, what comes later, either she's hoping to commission in the Space Force, but either Space Force or the Air Force, I wouldn't be intersecting with all these different feelings and thoughts. When I drove on to the Air Force Academy base from the North Gate, and this was like 2 weeks ago, the Thunderbirds were practicing for the graduation ceremony. And literally, yeah, so good. And Lisa, literally 2 of the Thunderbirds passed right over me, at who knows how many hundreds of knots, 200 feet or so off of the deck. And it was just so cool and so amazing. But I cannot see a plane like that, especially a fighter, like one of the Thunderbirds, without, this pain and sort of desire. Like, I wanted to do that. I wanted to be able to do that. And so anyway, I talked about how important healing is, how one of our pastors in the past talked about scars and wounds, and how sometimes we have trauma that inflicts wounds upon us that like is still bleeding metaphorically. And with the passage of time, those wounds can scar over and can, quote, heal. They're still visible, and they're still, those experiences are still with us, but they become scars that are easier to talk about, and we can kind of take those out and talk about them. And so anyway, it's been a positively redemptive and healing thing for me to be reinserted into a military environment. And I've had interactions via Facebook and some other ways with classmates over the years, but it's been really good and it's been really positive. And so once Shelly gets back over here with the dog, we have both had experiences of severe trauma in our lives. I know, buddy. It's a dog. It's okay. No, it's okay. It's just a puppy. Yeah, he gets to be here too. Yeah. Come on. We could let's pause. Why don't let's Okay, so we've had the dog encounter. Now let's try to jump back into this. So the summary of mine is it's been very healthy and positive and healing to have an opportunity to re-engage with different things that are sort of, sparks or reminders of tough stuff that happened in the past, and, feeling positive and good about where I am today and the distance that I have from those experiences. But part of what I talked about was identity and what a big deal it is to, change your identity in terms of what you do. And sometimes that's actually taking off your uniform or leaving a community. So, all right, Shelly, what do you want to say about that?
I don't have anything deep that I want to go into, but I think what I love about being here at this time of year is that we've just finished up a long school year. Some, things that were not really foreseen or planned upon. Wes ended up teaching some AP computer science classes, and I ended up teaching for a few months because of a family medical issue with my lead teacher. And anyway, I think we're both pretty busy people, and having those added stresses really kind of made the last few months of school hard. So what I love about being up here in the mountains is kind of being able to start our summer, to relax, to refresh, to renew. That's definitely healing. Not necessarily from trauma per se, but just from a busyness of life. And so it's really nice to kind of get off grid as much as possible, and relax and renew. And this is a beautiful place to be able to do that. So, one of those things that we love doing while we're camping and trying to be off our devices, which again is hard. Here we are, Mile High and on our device, but for a good reason, is read. And so I'm usually a big fantasy reader. I like dragons and elves and things like that. But this time I kind of went on a science fiction journey, which I also love to read science fiction, but this is probably more science fiction. And it's a new author, and doggone it, I never know the authors or the names of my books. But anyway, it's science fiction. It's about aliens. It's about colonizing new planets. It's about protecting your home. It's about genetics and DNA and cloning. transferring consciousness into bodies and in a way that is perceivable. Like, I love those books where you can be reading science fiction, but somehow it seems like, oh, this could really happen. The adjacent possible. So I've really been enjoying it. And it talks a lot about what does it mean? What kind of person? Why do we do the things that we do? Would it be possible to transfer consciousness into a clone? I think it's called, the first book I read in the series was called Old Man's War. And so it's about older people who decide that they're going to, at age 75, give up their bodies basically to science. And then they're cloned, and then their consciousness is transferred into that new body. And then they go out and defend the earth from aliens. And anyway, so a lot of good science fiction, but it has a great science base, a lot of physics. And, it makes me think about AI and AI enhancements into minds. Anyway, I've really enjoyed it. It's fun for me to that's the way I get away and relax, refresh, and renew is by reading. So how about you, Wes?
And I'll include links to the video I referenced, to Shelley's book, and to mine as well. I am reading a first-person memoir of the Civil War, and it's actually a result of the trip I took to Colorado. It is the memoirs of French Harding, and it was edited by
Your dad's last name?
Yeah, Thacker. Vic Thacker, who is one of the 1963 Air Force Academy classmates of my father, Tom Fryer. And Vic is from what is now West Virginia. At the time, it was Virginia. And later in life, after he had retired from the Air Force, he ended up going to a town in Randolph County. And anyway, through a series of events, learned that he was related to French Harding, and then discovered this memoir that was shared by relatives. And oh my gosh, he's just an absolute amazing writer. And I think that he wrote this memoir in his 70s or 80s. He has one of the most remarkable memories of anyone that I've ever read. And I think that one of the best ways to learn history is from the people who experienced it. And if you can't, talk to them directly, being able to read things that they've written, being able to read interviews that people have done with them, it brings history alive. And so French I think he participated in either 40 or 50 different battles during the Civil War. And Randolph County was occupied by federal forces, but it was very much a Southern stronghold. And many of the battles and engagements that French was involved in happened really, really close to his home. And he served for more than the first half of the Civil War, I think, until it was like the winter of 1863 before the campaigns in 1864 kicked off in the spring. He was a company commander. At that time, the soldiers would elect, in many cases, their lieutenants, and then they would end up, getting promoted. And I think he turned down colonel at one point. He ended up having to resign because of differences with this with a colonel that was over them. But I mean, he personally interacted with General Robert E. Lee, with Stonewall Jackson. In fact, his company was part of Stonewall Jackson's, and I'm not going to say this right, whether it was brigade or what the organizational unit. Oh my gosh. One of the things that's so incredible about this is, first off, thinking about how recent this really was not that long ago. And I don't know, but I think myself, idealistically and naively, learning about history, studying history, the United States Civil War seemed to me to be something that was in such the distant past, and it was something that we were just over, and man, in so many ways, we're not over those same struggles. And some of those have to do with our conception of rights and who should be afforded rights. But the ways in which French was able to interact with his family, the loss of his older brother and then his younger brother, his bravery and courage. He acted as a spy, gaining intelligence. He was an incredible, like today, I think he would have been an Ironman triathlete, because the amount of ground that he could cover, and sometimes he would go by himself. It was just crazy. I mean, I think he talked about covering 53 miles in 11 hours. And basically, a lot of folks just couldn't stay up with him. And then he ended up becoming a cavalry officer when he had to resign from his initial company that he had served with for so many years. But it makes me want to go up to Randolph County. It makes me want to learn more about that history. When we've been to Loudoun County, to our friends the Conaways, who have a wonderful farm called View of Heaven Farm that is in Loudoun County, just outside of Purcellville. That's not that far from West Virginia and Winchester and this area of the Shenandoah Valley. And just like we were talking earlier in this podcast about how impactful it can be to learn about history, place-based history. We got to visit, what was the national park that was the armory there on the Shenandoah River?
Shenandoah National Park?
Yeah, we did that, but no, I'm talking about Harper's Ferry.
Oh,
yeah, just amazing to be able to be there at Harper's Ferry and to visit. But it's so important to step outside the classroom and to learn about our world and our neighbors, and think about the history that we've experienced together, but the ways in which we can learn from that history and strive to do better, whether that's Shelley thinking about science fiction and space and exploration, and how we don't need to just repeat the mistakes of the colonizers and empire builders of the past. The ways in which we really need to strive to build the Star Trek society, the society that does recognize the universal humanity of all people and the right that we each have to thrive in life, which means, food, shelter, medical care, but it also means family, a loving community, support, education, so many different things. All right. Well, I've been given the signal that it's time to stop. So we hope that you are able to have a good, restful summer wherever you are and find beautiful places to have picnics and reflect on life.
Wes and Shelly Share is a weekly podcast recorded and published on Sundays by Wesley and Shelly Fryer of Matthews, North Carolina. Learn more and find links to connect on social media to Wes and Shelly by visiting shellyfryer.com/podcast. Content on this podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Only 3.0 license. The Wes and Shelly Share podcast is recorded and published with Anchor and distributed on all major podcast channels, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and more. Please share our show on social media and tell others about us. Let us know on Facebook or via other means what you like about the show, that you're listening, and if you have any suggestions for future episodes. Stay curious, go outside, and keep exploring.